Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by ActualTech Media. Today's topic, technologies that support and enable a remote workforce. On this event, you'll hear from experts at ActualTech, NetApp, Rapid7, and Duo. Thank you so much for joining us on this special EcoCast event. This is a very timely topic, as I'm sure you well know, for 2020 and 2021. With so many of us working from home and so many of us in IT supporting now a 100% or virtually 100% remote workforce, we're all in need of solutions to help make remote work more efficient and more secure. And that's what this EcoCast is all about. We at ActualTech Media created the EcoCast and MegaCast event series to help IT professionals such as yourselves learn about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it quickly and efficiently and get all your questions answered. All of us at ActualTech Media are former IT professionals ourselves, so we know just how challenging it can be in enterprise IT. My name is David Davis of ActualTech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator for this EcoCast. Before we get started, just a few things that you should be aware of. We do have some awesome prizes. I'll talk about those in just a moment, as well as the eligibility requirements for the prize drawings. We said we want this to be educational, so I encourage you to use the questions box. I'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our expert presenters, and I need your questions. We're also doing a new prize in 2021, which is the Best Question Prize, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. I also have a number of questions for you, our audience. I'll be bringing up poll questions, and I'll be sharing the results of those polls with you, so we appreciate your participation in advance. We want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from your console, and the hashtag for today's event on Twitter will be automatically appended. And finally, we have a number of resources in the Handouts tab, PDFs, and links that I encourage you to check out before you go. On today's EcoCast, we'll be announcing the winner of 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify. I'll be announcing the prize winners of these gift cards throughout the event. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. You can find the full prize terms and conditions in your Handouts tab. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing our Best Question Prize, which is a $50 Amazon gift card, one $50 Amazon gift card for each of the presentations on the event today. With 4 presentations, that means 4 Amazon $50 gift cards. All prize winners must meet the ActualTech Media prize policy, and prize winners will be contacted after the event. Now, over the years, with the ActualTech Media EcoCast and MegaCast event series, thanks to generous attendees, we have supported the charities you see here on the screen. If you win a prize today and you'd like to donate your prize value to charity, we would love to help you do that. I said we want this to be a social event. The hashtag over on Twitter is ATMEcoCast. I'll be monitoring the hashtag, and like I said, you can tweet directly from your audience console. Feel free to follow ActualTech Media on Twitter, and me as well, David M. Davis. You can subscribe to all the ActualTech Media social channels there in your audience console, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. Also, check out all of our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn. Now, before we do a few poll questions and I introduce you to our first presenter, I want to briefly talk about the state of remote work. This is a new reality that all of us have been facing starting in 2020, and it's now moving on into 2021. For many, working from home and all this remote work was really never in the cards. Organizations have been scrambling to support their remote workers, but current technologies, innovative new technologies, have made this a lot easier than in the old days. We've got security, productivity, scalability, and connectivity tools that can help us meet these challenges. But policy frameworks just weren't in place for work from home, but I'm willing to bet that most of you have them in place now. But the biggest challenge that still remains with supporting remote work environments is security. Most companies are now 100% remote and will be for some time. Many of us have never worked from home before. We aren't used to securing our remote work environments as we did in the office. And most IT organizations just weren't designed for 100% work from home. And unfortunately, malicious attackers are leveraging this unexpected event. Ransomware infections and data breaches are on the rise, and there's a lot of different technologies at play here that make work from home environments possible. We've got virtual desktops, VDI or desktop as a service, multi-factor authentication, distributed data protection and backup tools, collaboration tools, hyperconvergence, and security tools. So how will you secure your remote workforce? Well, my tips here are, first off, don't forgo security for the sake of expediency. Security is important, so make sure that you take time and do it right. Also, as always, apply security in layers, and that applies to the remote workforce and remote devices as well. Security tools are crucial, but also security education of your remote workers is also important. Insurance, of course, cybersecurity insurance should be investigated, and look forward to what normal might be like in hopefully a year's time. And of course, always be on the lookout for new and innovative solutions. And honestly, that's what this EcoCast is all about. We've got some really exciting, innovative remote workforce security, authentication, tracking, and data protection tools, all of which you'll be learning about on this EcoCast event. Before we get started and I introduce you to our first presenter, let's first do a few poll questions, and I'll share the results with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers.
All right, I just brought up the first poll question. It's there on the screen. Will the pandemic permanently change your organization's work from home or in-office ratio? If you haven't answered these polls before, you just do it right there in the slides window. I'll give everyone a moment to answer this, and then I'll share the results with you. So you can see how you stack up with your peers here on the event. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. So take a look at that. 80% say that the pandemic will permanently change their office's work from home or in-office ratio. Important to consider there. Next question is on the screen. Are you still hesitant to use VDI for some use cases, for example, high-end graphics, things like CAD? All right, I see a lot of responses coming in. Thank you for those. Let me go ahead and share the results here with you. And it's a pretty even split there, 51 to 48, 51% saying yes, they're still hesitant to use VDI virtual desktop infrastructure for high-end graphic applications like CAD. Okay, interesting to know. And then last question here before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is simply, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company, specifically related to work from home or remote workforce IT solutions? I'll give everyone a moment to answer this one. All right, thank you everyone who responded to the polls there. We do value your feedback here at ActualTech Media. And now it's time to kick off today's EcoCast with our first presenter. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Ted Keatsman, Product Marketing Manager at Duo. Ted, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Take it away, Ted.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Great. So I'm here to talk a little bit about Duo, but also anomaly detection and how it can aid in some of your work, secure remote work strategy. I'm going to move through my deck here. Let's see if I can just press this. Yep, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about access anomaly detection and how it can be a nice layer to apply onto some of the work you're doing to secure remote work. To ground the conversation, though, I did want to just high level talk about Duo for a second. I feel like most people have heard of Duo at this point, but just to give everyone sort of what we're doing in the space, we're a secure access provider. So one of our primary lines of features feature functionality is multi-factor authentication, so ensuring users are who they say they are, which is that bottom left bucket, trusted users, and making sure that they have the right access to the right thing. The second thing that we do is provide some device inspection and make sure that devices are healthy before they're allowed access. And then we're doing that to all of your applications. So whether that's a VPN that you're using, whether you're using a granular remote access tool, whether you're using cloud applications, Duo is providing that zero trust access. So making sure at every point of access the user is who they say they are and they're accessing from a helpful device or a healthy device. But today I'm going to focus on the middle portion of that, the glue that binds these things together, which is visibility and policies. So underneath that, under the hood there is some things that we do around contextual policy, who's allowed to access what given what context, device visibility, are they accessing from a Mac device, are they accessing from a BYOD, are they accessing from a managed device, the status of that device, do they have a screen lock enabled, do they have a firewall enabled, and then if they don't have some of these things that you would expect, we can actually lead them through some self-remediation. I want to make sure here, yeah, that's great, that when I click that it shows up. Something that Duo has added on to this portfolio of things in our visibility and policy section is access analytics, or anomaly detection in access. And this has been really helpful to a lot of our customers throughout the pandemic and having people transition to work from home, because making sure that as they're moving to those new home offices or wherever they're working, that we're picking up on that data and we're understanding that data, and then we can set a new baseline for them. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So we call this feature Duo Trust Monitor. It'll be the focus of this presentation. I'm not going to focus on MFA or some of the other things that Duo does. This is relatively new and something I think is worth discussing. So Trust Monitor is our data science tool. We have an in-house data science team that knows our logs, knows our data better than anyone else. This feature ingests authentication and access data to create a normal baseline of authentication activity. And by creating this visibility into what's normal or to the baseline of data, we can then highlight anomalies, highlight things that are riskier, highlight things that maybe you would want to look into and build into potentially a remediation scenario where it's like, are these credentials doing what they're supposed to be doing? But let's get a little more detailed about what that even means. So without access analytics or without any sort of data science, user access activity is pretty hard to parse and organize. To give an example or to try and visualize it, on the right, this is what a typical data structure might look like. These are access attempts. Maybe this is, in a US office, and this is another office. Maybe this is at a particular time of day, where these clusters are pieces where it's pretty, we expect that. We expect this is, that your home office, or before, in the before times, this is, the headquarters, and this is sort of 9 to 5. We would expect most of the access attempts to happen then. Maybe this is another geolocation. This is a satellite office, and we expect most of the authentications to happen at a different time, or for the second blob there, official term. So assessing risky logins can be hard. We heard from customers across the board that, I love all the authentication logs that you provide, but it's hard for me to parse or tell which ones I should be worried about, or which ones, you have this whole extensive log, but, a lot of them are just J. Smith accessed at, 9:30 a.m. instead of VPN. That makes sense. So we decided to build out functionality that takes in all the variables that Duo has. And I do want to be clear here, Duo is an access security company. We don't look at network data. We don't look at a variety of other data that other providers might have. So our slice of the security world is, when people are accessing applications, when they're using their credentials to do so, And so we get things like what country they're doing that from, what device they're doing it from, what application they're accessing, what authentication factor they're using, what time of day that they're doing it. And we can combine all of those things, look at historical patterns, do some algorithmic analysis, which we've built in-house, and there's some pretty interesting insights that I'll talk about in a couple slides, but to build out how risky or how anomalous a particular login attempt is. So what does that mean? You know, we're looking to surface anomalies, these dots that are way outside the norm and don't fit historical patterns. If any of you have worked with, you know, an anomaly detection tool before, you probably know that there's going to be this sort of three groupings of what anomalies bring up. One is sort of benign anomalies. This is something that's strange, but if you looked at it, you would say this is a false positive, or this is something that I don't have to worry about. Then suspicious behavior. This might be fine, but it might also require some digging in a little deeper, reaching out to that a person and saying, hey, did you actually do this activity? Maybe putting them in some sort of pipeline to review their credentials and make sure that they're okay. And lastly, you know, there's actual attacks where these are credentials that are in the wrong hands. They are attempting access. They're sniffing around, and you know, want to deal with this as quickly as possible. So to think about the problems with access analytics or any analytics tool that you might see, many tools on the market put in place pretty easy analytics rules to implement. Here's a really easy one. Any new device, highlight and flag as a problem, any single one. The majority of cases where that happens, it's probably somebody registering a new device, probably somebody using a new device to access, but you know, so it's going to be increase that benign anomaly ratio, or you know, a new somebody uses a new application. If they're new to the workforce, they might be hitting new application, new application, new application, new application, and you get all these alerts, and it's just the same set of credentials that were, you know, somebody was hired 2 weeks ago, and they're hitting all their applications for the first time. So novelty in its simplest form is helpful, but it can drastically increase sort of benign anomalies or false positives. So this is just something I would say, general piece of advice. You know, if somebody's just doing only new sign-in, new device, that's okay, and that provides a certain layer of security, but it will probably give you a little bit of a headache with how many false positives it throws off. So what Duo is trying to do, and our in-house data science team is working on this sort of day and night, is understanding a strong fact about security analytics, which makes it difficult all the time, which is that people do new or strange things that aren't malicious. That's just, we're people. We log, oh, I have to log in, I forgot something at work, or I have to, I'm working on a project late. So we do things that aren't necessarily bad. And so one of the big pieces of Trust Monitor, and I think this is an important thing to do, is look at historical and correlative context in any given case before we sort of shoot off a flag saying this is something we're worried about. And so what do I mean by that? Let's give a couple examples. I guess that's a little off, but at Duo, in the before times, when we were headed out for a business trip or something like that, we were often given a Chromebook for traveling. And so in Duo's case, at our company, it is expected that if you try to access your work applications from a Chromebook while you're at a different IP, or you know, traveling, you're in a different part of the country, that's expected. And the Duo algorithm that's looking at this knows the context and knows that about the company, by picking up on the patterns and understanding sort of it's a decision tree algorithm that will understand those components, and it will say that's expected for us. This is in contrast to a variety of other solutions where we say, hey, this is a new Chromebook, or this is a new device, this is a new location, flag this all day. And so basically anyone who travels at any time at Duo would have been flagged because it's pretty anomalous. If they're using a new device and they're using a new location, they're at a new location. So I would just say taking in that context and understanding the company structure, understanding what the patterns within the company are, and taking those into account can be really helpful. That all being said, we would still obviously toss something like if an engineer's credentials try to access Salesforce, given it's the weekend, those things never correlate. That activity isn't expected ever, even. So first of all, the departmental piece and the weekend piece both point to anomalous in a way that's more malicious, and that would still be something that we would highlight to a Duo administrator. So let's actually talk about what an anomaly looks like in Duo. If you were to log in, it would show up as, here's an authentication that we deemed anomalous and worthy of inspection. We don't actually show a risk score, even though we're calculating one in the background, because we feel like that's, people love to do that. Hey, it's 88 and it's red. Well, what's the difference between 88 and 86 and 69 and 71? The scores can be sort of confusing. We only surface things that we think are worthy of at least looking at. They may not all be, breaches, obviously, but these are things that have passed a threshold that we feel comfortable. We're gonna show it, and then we're gonna provide context. So there's no black box. You'll see it's a little blurry, but we give the 3 reasons this was highlighted to you. So in this case, there was a new access device, and we'll give you the statistics about the device beneath that. This person almost always accesses from a Windows 10 or a Windows 7 device, and in this case, Mac. We're seeing a Mac device come in. This person doesn't usually access the code base. They're a designer. They haven't accessed GitLab in the past 180 days. That looks a little odd. And finally, unusual 2FA method. They almost always use a push notification. In this case, they've done what we would call down factoring. So these credentials are attempting to log in using an SMS passcode instead of a push. So if you look at all these things together, new device, new application that's not expected, and the less secure form of two-factor, that's something that you probably want to look into. And there are other types of anomalies we surface. This isn't a full list, but I think some of these are kind of interesting. One is we'll do unrealistic geovelocity. This is a pretty classic one. I think that term's made up for the security industry. People also call them Superman logins. But it is, these credentials have attempted access from 2 different locations that are way too far apart for that access to have happened by them getting on a plane or driving or something like that. That usually points to something fishy going on. We can do unusual IP. And just to be clear here, we get a lot of questions around, hey, but people used to be working in the office and now they're working from home. Our model updates very quickly to understand, hey, like for my credentials, for example, they're now in his home IP, and they have been for the last, 100% of logins, basically, for the last 6 months, 8 months. It will update and take in new data to sort of rebound and rebaseline what's going on and what's normal, or sort of the new normal, to use the overused phrase. But unusual IP is something we'll pick up on. So if my credentials are expected from from my home office, then if you see them showing up from Europe or somewhere else, that might be something to check in on. And finally, we can do time as well, which looking at when these credentials typically access, and you'll even see these sort of bell curves as to like how or when is expected, and if it's in that exceedingly unexpected time in the middle of the night for a certain set of credentials or at a way different time zone, those things will be picked up as well. So most of what we do in Duo is statistical in nature. We are looking at historical patterns, but we also have found that there are other types of valuable risk to bring in, and this is actually especially relevant these days. If folks have been reading about certain breaches in the news, one of these is bypass status enabled. So if somebody gets, unwarranted administrative access and are enabling bypass mode for sets of credentials, we're highlighting that. So we'll let you know for any set of credentials where they're not seeing pushes anymore, when that's been enabled, and they're not seeing that multi-factor, we're highlighting that. And also any case where somebody marks a fraud button. This was in a report in Duo, but we're moving it over into this area as well. So Trust Monitor becomes the place for all risky logins or all risky actions with bypass status enabled, or looking at some of those administrative privileges and how to make sure that we're highlighting things along those lines as well. All right, as a quick, highlight, what does it take to use? Some people with analytics tools, they're like, oh, is it going to be, I have to put an agent on all these billion things, and I have to, it has to tune for 6 months. No, this tool is meant to be super easy. If you have Duo, you can just turn it on with a flip of a switch. It starts giving you security events and adds that other extra layer of security in about 24 hours after you set it up. And then you'll have your dashboard that's showing you different security events, different access that's sort of risky in your environment that you can check on. So we also understand that Duo works with a ton of SMB and mid-market customers, which it's more worthwhile, and we've done this validation for them to actually log into Duo and review the risky logins there. It's not uncommon for them to follow that workflow. But for larger customers who have more robust either SOCs or are working with a large SIEM instance, and they want to get these risky logins into another tool or to another team, we've made it really easy to do that. We've built out a bunch of different APIs and sync tools to make sure that it's easy to pull these risky events into other tools, other areas, and get it into the hands of people that need it or want to see it, and make it easy for it to be part of their workflow. So just as a side note, it's always worthwhile to get feedback. This tool was only launched at the end of last year, so this feature is pretty brand new for Duo, but we've already gotten positive feedback about, it's highlighting events where that were dangerous or risky. It's from the first moment it was turned on, found events that are worth looking into. And it also is just helpful in showing, where your assumptions might be wrong. You could assume that things are happening or that this particular type of access is normal, but after having Trust Monitor on or looking at these Duo events, you might understand, people are using more of these or doing more of these types of devices. I'm seeing these types of anomalies. So it can show you where your assumptions about your environment might be wrong as well. So to finish out, I did want to just show the future of Trust Monitor and this feature. So right now, as I've sort of alluded to throughout the presentation, it's just surfacing events to you. It's not reacting to those events. So it's showing you, hey, here's a risky event that we saw. Here's a risky login attempt. But the future is going to be actually being able to modify the login experience based on that risk. So saying, all right, in the first session of the day, we'll require somebody to MFA. But then from there on out, we might allow them to remember that validity or that authentication through a couple different sessions, a couple different applications, especially if all the context stays the same. Hey, this access attempt is coming from that same computer, coming from the same IP. Those credentials haven't moved. We'll reduce the number of pushes for a person throughout their day and reduce the number of MFA that we're enforcing. But if context drastically changes, we might require a high-risk form of login. So we see something that's like a UV key, where you actually have to touch it. It has to be on that device. If we see those credentials attempt something, either an application that's incredibly risky, or they move location really drastically, or the device is new, or a combination of those things, we might require what we would call step up. So this isn't available as of today, but it's something that we're working on in the next 3 to 6 months here, to just get out this sort of adaptive experience too, based on the risk behind the scenes, based on the context and the historical patterns behind the scenes too. So that all being said, that's the future of where we're going with Trust Monitor and where Duo is going with its access analytics tool. But that is the end of the planned presentation. I'm happy to take questions, comments, ask anything about access analytics or things along those lines.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. We do have a lot of questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll question that you see on the screen here. For everyone out there, the question is, what additional information would you like about the Duo security solution? And so we encourage you to answer that. We appreciate your feedback. Let's see, Ted, we got a lot of good questions that came in. First question on the list here, Timothy's asking, if the authentication fails, will this offer them other choices for authentication?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm not sure what you mean by fail in this case, but it definitely, if it doesn't work, we do offer, they can choose another method to authenticate. So yes, it does work that way. But I'm not sure in how you're envisioning it failing, if it's actually a compromised credential and so it's failing that way, or if they've mistyped something or something along those lines. But yes, there are always like another option you can say. It would say, hey, that one failed. Try using a UV key. Try using a phone call back instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Another question here. They're asking. Let's see. They're asking, what if we have a dynamic IP? How does this work?
That's a great point. So in some cases, we've seen IP isn't the strongest indicator for us, and the algorithm actually modifies itself to understand, that IP isn't going to be strong signal if it's changing all the time, or if it's not available. In some cases, it's obfuscated. Then we'll rely more heavily on other factors. Like we'll always have a timestamp. We'll always have the factor they're using. We oftentimes have device information, and so the algorithm starts to rely higher on those than some of the IP information.
Okay, nice. And then what about biometrics is a question from Mark. Does this work with biometrics in some way?
Yep, totally. So one, if biometrics are a factor you're using, it'll work with those. So it'll say, this person, and those are usually pretty secure. But if it's, if it's like we expect a person to use Touch ID and they don't use that, that's definitely something this tool would pick up on. I log in with Touch ID. I will log in with Windows Hello every day. And then if they don't do that, if they log in and it's some other mechanism, then this would be able to tell the difference between those two things, yes.
Got it, okay. Mike is asking what products Trust Monitor integrates with? Is there some sort of like a compatibility list or?
Right, that's a really good question, and I do want to be clear about something. Trust Monitor doesn't take in signals from anything else. It's a Duo. It's just run on Duo data, And that's because we don't see ourselves as a centralizing force in security. We're the access security, and we want to be the best at that. But yeah, if your question is where the data then goes and where we integrate with, yeah, we have a great integration with Splunk to get things over into a SIEM that way. If you've been keeping tabs on Cisco, we have an integration with SecureX, which is their XDR tool, or broader, sort of platform tool. And so we can get and then any tool that you sort of want to configure an integration with, we have that API I mentioned. So getting our risky events out, we have a variety of integrations to do that. We aren't at this point bringing in like new signals from other tools to like make our events different, if that makes sense. Got it.
Okay. Travis is asking about what's the maximum number of attempts, and if you exceed that, you get locked out. Does this product do that, or is that more in the Duo security?
Yeah, that's a great point too. It will pick up on brute force attempts. I didn't show that example in examples of anomalies or whatever, but that's another one that could be popped up in Trust Monitor where it says, hey, this set of credentials attempted 8 logins in like 30 seconds. So it's one of those sort of spams that way, and it will say, that's a risky event, that sort of thing. So it will pick up on that attack pattern as well.
Okay. And is this a SaaS offering, or is this something you actually install in the data center?
Yep, it's a SaaS offering. So it's something. Duo is a SaaS offering. So the first and foremost, it's something that we, we're an access security. We're putting MFA. We're doing that verifying of user security, and that's where we get the access data that we then do analysis on, is by looking at the access attempts of those things where people are protected with MFA.
Got it. Okay. And so is this something that folks can try out? Is there some sort of evaluation that they could do?
It's a little bit tricky on that front because an analytics tool needs a baseline, and so it's sort of hard to try out because that would be sort of the worst time to sell you something, is when it's showing you data when it doesn't know anything. I definitely am happy to show demos and show what it looks like on anonymized data that we've had, those types of things. But it's a little bit weird to trial because you just don't have any data, and it wouldn't get up to speed fast enough for it to show real value to you. But
got it.
I mean, it does it in a couple of weeks, but it's sort of it takes a little bit of time.
Right. Okay, excellent. Well, so if folks want a trial, if folks want to see a personal demo, I encourage everyone out there to check the box on the screen right there in the slide that says personal demo. I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our Q&A session here, but a really great presentation. Ted, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And thank you to Duo Security for supporting the event today. Check out the handout that's at the top of the handouts tab right there on monitoring access risk, and it has more information on the new, or relatively new, Duo Trust Monitor. So make sure that you check that out, and of course fill out the poll question there if you'd like some additional information. And with that, it's time for our first prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card that's going to Jeff Soper from Utah. Congratulations, Jeff Soper from Utah. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and keep this EcoCast moving. It's now time for our next presentation. I'm excited to introduce you to Kathy Allen, Product Marketing Manager for Virtual Desktop Services at NetApp. Kathy, are you there?
I am. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's great to have you on. Now, before I know you start your presentation, we've got a poll question I'm just going to bring up here for the audience. And the question for everyone else there on the screen, I encourage everyone to check out the poll, is how are you enabling your remote workforce to maintain business continuity? Are you using VDI, VPN, remote desktop, local PCs or laptops, or some other form of technology? And it's a multi-select question here, so feel free to select more than one if you're using multiple. And so I'll give everyone a moment to answer this, and then I'll share the results, and I'll be interested to hear your take, Kathy, on what you think.
Okay, great. And while everybody's doing that, we just got a new statistic here from ESG, the Enterprise Strategy Group, that 85% of IT decision makers are moving apps and workloads to the cloud, to a public cloud, and managing them through a public cloud, which is a significant increase over previous, and that's all due to COVID. So what we're finding is that with COVID, since COVID hit, we've become this new normal where VDI is a tier 1 workload. And as such, more and more people are having to scale up quickly and easily to the cloud. They just didn't have the time or availability to scale out on-prem.
Absolutely, yeah. Interesting statistic. I can believe that. I've just shared the results of this poll, and it says 75% are using VPN, followed by 52% using remote desktop, 31% using local PC, 24% using VDI. Kathy, what's your take on the results?
Well, I think that for short-term remote desktop operations, that people did enable things like VPN or remote desktops, especially if employees weren't able to get their PCs before they had to go to a remote workforce option. But I think a lot of that will shift to more of cloud environments where they are going to be working in a VDI or SaaS delivered or DaaS delivered type environment in a cloud go forward as companies determine that their long-term solutions need to be more secure and have better performance. I think customers are really going to start moving away from on-prem and moving to a long-term remote workforce solution. This isn't going away, so.
Very well said. So tell us now about what's going on with NetApp when it comes to enabling, remote workforces for 2021 in the future.
I would love to. So I'll go ahead and get started. ESG has also put out some information about customers that are moving to a true VDI or DaaS environment, that 93% of them will end up leveraging somebody, a third party, to come and help them with their deployments and management. That's just because VDI is hard. So we know that there are a lot of challenges. We know that it's a lengthy process. There are high startup costs to go into a VDI environment, generally on-prem. We know that there's a lot of fine-tuning and tweaking and things to that effect. And if you have poor end-user experiences, your VDI environment is going to fail. However, NetApp can really make it easy. And I'm going to explain to you why and how. NetApp, first of all, NetApp is now a cloud-first company. We have multiple options for cloud enablement. One of the primary workloads that we work with is cloud. And as such, we've developed a tool called Virtual Desktop Service. So it's NetApp's VDS. You're going to hear me call it VDS quite frequently. And what VDS does is it streamlines your VDI environment from deployment, management, and optimization, all through a SaaS-delivered global control plane. And why is this unique? For anybody that has set up VDI on-prem or on their own, they know that it's a very lengthy deployment process. Well, VDS is unique. It takes the deployment and automates it. You go through the SaaS tool, you pick a few selections, you set up the environment with the selections that you pick, and you click execute, and then it goes. And it executes that deployment, and it executes the deployment across on-prem and multiple clouds. So you truly can set up a hybrid multi-cloud environment from one tool, regardless if it's in AWS, Azure, or Google, or a combination of them. VDS also handles the user management, setting up the virtual machines, deploying the images, all at one shot. VDS is unique in that it handles the entire app stack, including the Windows OS layer, setting up all of the security policies, setting up the apps, enabling you to deploy apps as you need it automatically through the tool. VDS handles the resource scheduling and optimization, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the future, or in another slide. And it all does all of this through a SaaS delivered global control plane and a single pane of glass. So you can manage, deploy, manage, and optimize your entire VDI environment for hybrid on-prem running on vSphere N-1 releases, or in the top 3 public clouds with Azure, GCP, or AWS, all from one tool. And it does all of that through automation and machine logic. So let's talk about some of the business outcomes that you can obtain with VDS. So VDI is now a tier 1 workload on par with an SAP or Oracle. And some people say, well, why do you think that? Well, how many of our staff are working remotely globally? It's upwards of 93% still, and that number is not looking to go down by much. So when you're considering how your staff maintains your business continuity, keeps the lights on, keeps things going, they have to have that enterprise class workload. They have to have that enterprise class experience. It's built, VDS is built on enterprise class storage through NetApp storage solutions and ONTAP, as well as our cloud storage solutions. We integrate with the top 3 clouds as well as on-premise. And it has a full selection of cloud tools that help integrate that. We have rapid deployment. We can take a deployment of an entire environment, regardless whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, and take that deployment from days or weeks to minutes and hours, and literally do it seamlessly. Things that can run concurrent will automatically run concurrent. Once you make your selections and you execute it, you walk away. The only time you have to have any other intervention is if there's a problem. And generally, VDS will solve those problems automatically. And you can deploy it on any cloud, anywhere, at any time. It streamlines the optimization and management and orchestration. It is event-driven. So once you get your environment up, your day-to-day management or your normal scheduled management is very simple. You go in and make your tweaks that you need to, and then execute those, and they're taken care of. It's very, very simple. It has dynamic integration. So you can automatically integrate your on-prem environment and your Active Directories and such. You can integrate them with Active Directories on the clouds. You can add more cloud usage automatically, and VDS will automatically recognize it and integrate it into your single pane of glass tool. And then you're going to reduce the spend, and we're going to go a little bit into that later, but overall you can reduce your cloud spend by upwards of 48% or more, your IT resource spend by upwards of 67% or more, and your compute layer spend by up to 90%. So all in all, it really saves you money, time, and effort. So let's talk about how we can optimize the cloud spend. VDS incorporates something called live scaling. It's kind of like you have a great big bag of chips and you open it up and you realize that 2/3 of it's there. So you get what you want out and you close it back up and it's significantly reduced, right? So live scaling is a policy-based resource allocation. It goes out and determines what resources are needed for your current environment, and then will automatically go out and look at the existing virtual machines out there. If they are not working, if they are not in use, VDS will go ahead and close those down so that you reduce your overall cost spend. And then you have your workload scheduling engine. Basically, that's like setting your schedule of your peak work hours to cover your boot storms, your login storms, your peak peak efficiency hours that most of the people are working online, and then your log-off stores. And that's all driven by a policy, and VDS will ramp up resources or reduce resources as needed based on that policy. But for those people who get up in the middle of the third quarter when everybody's in the red zone, about to score and goes get some more snacks, or works out of that scheduled hour, there's a wake-on-demand override that enables VDS to deliver the resources that particular user would need at that time and automatically reduces those resources or delivers them back to the cloud when that person logs off. So again, there's not resources allocated or even VMs allocated and open when they're not actively in use. And that will ultimately drive 48% or more in cloud spend. And then when you factor in Spot by NetApp, that adds even more, because what Spot does is it goes out and it pulls each of the public clouds to determine what is the best spend, the best price for virtual machine at any given time. Then it takes any open virtual machines and applies that price to it for that time period. And then when that time period's up, it automatically goes out and does it again. So if you've got a virtual machine that can run at 90% less or 10 cents on the dollar than a normal price, and you run those virtual machines consistently at those prices, as long as those prices are available, you're going to reduce your overall spend. And NetApp or Spot by NetApp does that automatically for you. And then let's look at my mouse will work. Now, we talked about how NetApp will reduce your overall spend for your cloud resources, whether it's in VMs, resources, or compute. But let's talk about how NetApp can really save you money and man hours for your IT resources. Because because VDS automatically and concurrently runs many of these activities, the management layer, the deployment, so that you don't have to have an IT resource dedicated to that at any given time, that will reduce your overall IT resource allocation. For instance, for a 1,000-user environment running concurrently at 65% users, with a normal workload mix of 5 tasks, 10 standard, 80 knowledge, and knowledge is considered anybody that works with an Office 360 series of Office 365 products, and maybe 5 power users. They're typically the GPU users. With an IT resource that has an annual salary of $140,000 and over a 36-month period, without utilizing VDS at all, you're going to spend upwards of $1.8 million. That's just in salary. With VDS, you can reduce that by upwards of 67% or more and spend only $600,000. Imagine being able to reallocate those IT resources to other projects, to be proactive with other projects. Or maybe you have an IT staff that is not highly versed in the overall VDI manual processes and having to manage VDI manually in the traditional way. Even with cloud tools and such, it's not going to help IT resources that maybe are understaffed or unskilled. VDS will save those dollars for you. So you can save 48% or more with the scheduling, life scheduling, and workload resource scheduling, and then 90% of your cloud compute with Spot, and then with VDS, you can save 67% on your IT resources. With customers looking to move towards that VDI environment, this is the best way to go to manage it, and it's unlike any other tool in the market. There is not another tool that can manage the entire environment, including the entire application stack and all of the virtual environment, regardless of where it's at. Then we bring in the rest of NetApp, and we are able to unlock the best of cloud and deliver VDI at enterprise scale, all from NetApp. We can handle your storage management. We can handle your on-prem environment. We can extend your data fabric, including things like data protection with cloud backup, which can now back up on-prem and any cloud automatically. SaaS backup. Microsoft 365 data is not backed up by Microsoft. You need another tool to do so. SaaS backup handles that. Cloud compliance to make sure you're meeting your GDPR and other compliance requirements, and cloud secure. And then you also have the ability to have insights as to how things are going in your environment. You can see problems that might be there or trends that you might want to tweak. It will alert you when there are issues. And that's all incorporated in the VDI stack, the VDI and enterprise scale stack from NetApp, including VDS. So let's talk about a couple of case studies. So Brady Ware is a company that delivers accounting firms specific information and applications through virtual desktops. It has very complex financial and tax resources, and they chose VDS because it's uniquely positioned to be able to protect the identity of Brady Ware as well as its clients, and it's able to deliver applications and resources as required, spanning everything from user identity, server authentication, data file access, databases, profiles, and a numerous myriad of configurations that they have to deliver. VDS is also critical in that it was able to be agile in the capacity management and give consistent increases of resources to Brady Ware, utilizing their environment and optimizing all of their environment, including those user profiles, and making sure all the apps worked at any given time. And this is a case study that is very active. In fact, they just significantly increased their number of seats because they have a business that is growing quickly. And then we've got University Medical Associates. Now, University Medical Associates was a Citrix customer. They're on-prem, and they were having a very hard time managing that because the tools to manage on-prem environments were not at the level that they needed to manage their users. So they tried to move to Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, but they found it was very complex because there's a lot of PowerShells and manual work that has to be done. So they went back to Citrix. Well, they were asked to join a Microsoft webinar. They did, and they heard about VDS. So they came to NetApp and they said, we will give you 3 months. If you can move our 150 users, our pilot case, to a cloud and simplify the management of that, you've got our business. We did it in 2 weeks. And in 90 days, they tripled their user count. And as of now, it's almost 300% user account on Microsoft Azure with WVD being managed by VDS. They've saved time, energy, resources, and they've enabled their IT staff to be more proactive with the students and the medical staff that are there versus being constrained to work on their VDI environment. So all up, NetApp VDS is that VDI management for enterprise environment. It delivers VDI at enterprise scale. It's a SaaS-delivered global control plane for enterprise-class VDI. It's unique in the industry in that we can manage both the hybrid multi-cloud environments, including the management and optimization, all from a single pane of glass. And it deploys, manages, and optimizes the entire VDI stack, from infrastructure to virtual desktops, applications, and users. It is a very unique product that will help you across your entire VDI environment. And ultimately, NetApp can deliver and unlock the best in cloud. So now, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Kathy. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll for everyone out there in the audience. The poll on the screen is, what additional information would you like about the NetApp solution? And we'll leave that up here while we do some Q&A. So let's see, first question, Kathy, that came in I wanted to ask you. They say, we have a global remote workforce in multiple clouds. How can VDS help us manage those all together?
So as I stated, VDS is a SaaS-delivered global control plane that can deploy, manage, and optimize multiple cloud environments. So you can have a VDI environment for on-prem that you maybe are planning to keep that for some reason, or you haven't migrated that out. Or maybe that's your original VDI environment, and now you're bursting out to the cloud or migrating to the cloud. It can handle that, as well as your cloud environment in Azure, Google, or AWS, regardless of where they are, and in succession. So VDS can handle any or all of those environments very, very quickly and simplify the overall process.
Very nice. I didn't realize it had that sort of power to simplify multiple cloud environments. So that's cool. Next question here, they're asking if you can explain a little bit more about the automated deployment.
So that's an interesting one. Automated deployment is great because basically, for anybody that's ever deployed VDI on-prem or in the cloud, it's really time-consuming. What VDS does is you go into the single pane of glass, you make your selections, you upload your policies and such, and you decide what you want your infrastructure and your storage to be, as well as your user information, and configure your app stack from your Windows all the way down to your apps. And you click, as well as your security and network environment, and then you execute that. And once VDS starts that execute process, it will start working through all of the different things that need to be deployed. Where possible, it will do it in succession. Where it needs to be concurrent, it'll do that as well. So it will take everything that you've done, everything that you've selected, and execute it. In a traditional setup, you would have to do one piece and wait and come back and do another piece and wait and do another piece. You don't have that automation. And ultimately, VDS can shorten that overall time for deployment, as I said, from days to weeks to hours tops.
Very cool. I mean, I've done remote desktop services, large deployments before, and it's painful. So this sounds very, very appealing. Next question I wanted to ask you is about what kind of details can you tell us about specifically how this can save us administrative costs? Well,
the normal administrative costs are the work that an admin has to do is tedious. There are a lot of steps. In fact, we are working on a third party working on a calculator that goes out and actually does all the manual tasks for an environment, and it calculates the time and energy for those, as well as the comparative information of how much money is saved with VDS. In a manual environment, you have to execute one thing at a time. It's rare that you can double up or triple up on those executions, because a lot of times they require you to finish one before you start another. And so you're constantly sitting and watching and waiting for these things to get done. But with VDS, you can go in and make your selections, make the tweaks that you need to do, make sure your backups are working, your antivirus malware is up to date, make sure that your storage allocation and all is right, make sure you've applied any patches, updates, or versioning requirements for your entire application stack. And you make all those selections within the tool, and you execute that, and then you walk away. So all that work is done automatically and concurrently where possible, or in succession where needed, without you having to have any other user intervention. So your IT resource is able to go out and do other things or manage other environments or whatever they need to do to be proactive throughout your overall environment without having to worry about sitting and waiting for a task to be finished before they execute another. It can literally save your daily, weekly, monthly management, take it from days, hours to days, to minutes. It's very simple, and it's done automatically.
Wow, very cool. So what should folks do to get started? If they're interested in this, they want to maybe try it out or see it, what do you recommend?
So the best way to go is you would go out to cloud.netapp.com, and you can go out to cloud.netapp.com and see our entire cloud portfolio. But if you go cloud.netapp.com/VDS or virtual desktop service, you'll come to that specific page for virtual desktop services. And on that page, you have some videos, you have case studies, further case studies to look at, some additional resources to look at. But at the very top of the page, you're going to see a couple of buttons. One is a Azure and Google cost estimator. And you can go in and select your environments that you want to get some information on, and actually see what the cost would be when you're adding VDS based on the selections you've got. And that is a very, very powerful tool. But if you go to the Try It Now, you can actually request a 30-day free trial in a sandbox for VDS and apply it to your environment. See how it works. Play with it. Look at the various ways you can save money, time, and resources. And from there, if you decide, well, this is what I want to do, good. We can help you get that enabled permanently and across all of your environments to meet all of your user needs. But there's nothing more powerful than actually trying and working in the tool. And it will be enlightening. So I would recommend you go out to cloud.netapp.com, go to the VDS page, the Virtual Desktop Services page, and then try it now.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity. Like you say, seeing is believing. I encourage everyone to check it out. It sounds like it could help a lot of companies out there better enable their remote workforce. Kathy, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session, but there's a number of more technical questions I've saved for you there in the NetApp queue. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. I hope everybody has a great day and stay healthy.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you to NetApp. Don't forget to check out the NetApp handout as well. That's there in the Handouts tab. And with that, it's now time for our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Mark Allen, Head of Customer Experience at ActualTech. Mark, are you there?
I sure am. Hi, David.
Hi, Mark. It's great to have you on. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to talk with us and learn a little bit more about ActualTech and really how we can help empower your employees to become more productive and get more things done, especially during these times with a remote workforce. Let me jump to the next slide here. So today we'll be speaking a little bit about, why ActualTech. I'm going to walk everyone through a few moments of what our product actually looks like and how it works. We're going to talk about something I call the customer maturity cycle, which is effectively, a way for you as a consumer of information about productivity information on your employees to take some steps to evolve the way that your people are getting work done, the way that people are working most efficiently, effectively, planning for things like synchronous work or asynchronous work, trying to optimize for meetings. All of these various different inputs really matter and are material to the way that your organization is effective. So I'm going to walk everybody through that, as well as a little bit about our onboarding process and continuous support, because of course this is a somewhat new and emerging field for so many people that have never really monitored for productivity of their employees. And so having that lifeline, so to speak, or that bridge to where you can get help at an instant notice is really, really valuable. So we've made a very high priority for us to always get in touch with our customers and be there at just a moment's notice. And I'll walk you through a little bit about the differences between our platforms as well. But first, a little bit about ActualTech. We are an award-winning workforce productivity and analytics platform. And effectively, what we will do is allow for you to gain some visibility across your teams to understand and how to resolve workflow bottlenecks, to understand what your team is focused on, whether they're engaged, get a great understanding about the applications that you're using as an organization, how effectively those are being used. This can obviously be used in some cases for things like trying to mitigate costs or reduce costs for oversubscribed software, undersubscribed software. And then, of course, the main goal is really to improve productivity. And we believe that can be done through a lot of different methods, including collaboration and transparency. ActualTech has actually been around for over 10 years. We are an entirely cloud-based application. And, security is very important to us. We partnered with Google Cloud Platform in order to ensure that we have a very secure platform. And we have over 8,000 customers, closer to 8,600 customers today, with about 250,000 users. So we are tried and true. Now, in today's world, so many people are wondering, how do I manage my remote workforce? And they're asking questions like this. They're wondering, how do I get visibility into how many of my apps are being used, being able to manage license costs, and what does an internet policy even look like today? Clearly if your employees are still accessing private information, or whether it's intellectual property, customer information, PII, private health information, all of these different things, your computers need to be secured, and you also need to ensure that the way that your people are going about accessing this information is up to snuff. You need to make sure that they're following the proper processes, and so we can help out with that as well. And of course, our bread and butter is really helping you to understand time management and workload balance to really improve productivity. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right on in to demonstrating this, because I think seeing is a lot better than just hearing about it. And this is the product. This is ActualTech. You can find us at ActualTech.com. We're missing the E here, and we're missing a C. But as you might have already gleaned, the name itself, ActualTech, what this implies is we are tracking the active window for the application that is being used in order to determine where people are spending their time and their focus and their energy. So this web app here that you see, this is the default dashboard. There's nothing needed to configure. There's nothing crazy that I've done to get it in this position that it's in. I simply just loaded up our agent onto various different computers, and I've named a couple of groups. And so you can get up and running in far less than an hour. What I want to show you is that this all begins with the agent. And over in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that we have support for Windows operating systems, Mac, and even Chrome OS, as well as the Chrome browser itself. So if you download this agent, just know that it is specifically tied to an individual account, encrypted for that account. And what that means, of course, to you is that there's no extra configuration necessary. Now, normally, we advocate for people being transparent with their teams and their employees. We think that this is a vital, crucial step into monitoring of productivity because the information that is being collected by this agent reveals information about what applications are launched, what websites are visited, time that's being spent there, and some more information. So again, security is playing a very important part of this, but it's also very important that you're transparent with the organization itself. This is a tool that is meant to not to highlight deficiencies, but to highlight points where you can coach your employees or work through various different process improvements. So as we're looking at the dashboard, you'll see that I am looking at all users across the last 7 days. We could, of course, change this to any time frame. There's no data retention requirements. We will collect data for you as long as you're a customer of ActualTech. And so we even have customers that have years worth of data that's shown. What the very first part that we're looking at here is called the Team Pulse. And the intention is for us to be able to, at a glance, share with you where people are right now and what they're doing. So I've got a group over here called managers. We can see how long they've been online for today. It's about noon over here in Texas. So 4 hours is about right across the team. And then we can see what activity is the top activity. So with my manager team, they're spending most of their time in Gmail. Same is true with the remote sales team. Same is true with customer success. But then as we go to the sales team, you see that Salesforce is being used most frequently. And for our channel team, they're using an application called Front. We can get a lot more detailed information than just this by simply drilling into today's view and seeing more info on this pulse view. So again, this is listed by group, but I could switch this up and go start to look at my individual users for the day and see where they're spending their time and how productive they've been. We have a high rate of productive time here that's listed in this demo environment, as you might imagine. But this is showing specifically where people are at this point in time. So for example, Stephen, he's currently in Slack. You can see Kayla, she just switched context. Her URL switched from one of her emails to another, and so on. You can see maybe some of those that have had a little bit less productive days so far, and if we wanted to go get more information, we could drill into that. Headed back over to the dashboard, I just want to highlight that this top users and groups report really gives you a quick synopsis, again, of how productive your employees have been for the day. So if I click on top users and groups, we can easily see in this summary view the productive time for the last 7 days, the unproductive time for the last 7 days, and then what we call undefined, which is just simply an activity that hasn't been classified as productive or unproductive. By the way, in case you're wondering, we do automatically list over 10,000 different websites and applications as productive or unproductive, but we always give you the control to decide if that's appropriate or not. Now, this down below is one of my favorite graphs. This is actually representing an individual. So I see 40, that's his name here. He's very productive this week. If I scroll down a little bit, I can see how his time has been broken up over the last week. Maybe for demonstration purposes, I'll choose somebody else here. Bobby Joe, she's got a little bit of unproductive time as well. And as I go, scroll down, I can see the last 7 days and generally what time she begins work. So she's kind of an early riser, usually on her computer a little bit before 7 a.m., and generally hitting it hard with looking at Slack messages, getting into an application called Intercom, and maybe a few other things. We can see where there are gaps in time, and we can also see where maybe, looks like maybe some news coverage or something like that, YouTube coverage going on yesterday, and probably, there you go, farmhouse delivery. So we can see what is being done that's productive versus what's unproductive all throughout the employee's day. Now, it's not just about what's productive and what's unproductive, but it's also about what tools are being used and what category of tool is being used. So in this case, we've got a lot of different categories here for our team, as you might expect, because we're looking at a bunch of salespeople. The top tool that they're using are sales tools. And so that would include everything from Salesforce to Outreach to Visualforce to Chorus AI to DocuSign and so on. Various different tools that are being used. Again, this is a great way to be able to quickly identify which apps and which websites are actually being used versus those that are maybe allocated for the team to go ahead and sort of, get an idea on usage and where you can scale back those licensing costs or perhaps expand them. Other categories that we're showing, so email, clearly there's a lot of different ways to access email. Meeting software, of course, Zoom, GoToMeeting, some of the usual kind of suspects, Cisco's WebEx, and then our own product is ActualTech. We're tracking that as well. So the point of all of this is you do have the flexibility to create custom categories or just go with the existing categories that ActualTech decides and has looked at, again, over the 250,000 plus users in all of their activities. Jumping really quickly into classification, this gives you a good synopsis of all of the activities that have been classified and maybe some of those that are pending classification, which means we haven't maybe seen this app before, this diagnostics troubleshooting wizard, or maybe we haven't noticed this website before or this one. And so this would allow you as a manager to go in and quickly understand what the website is and decide whether or not it's productive or unproductive, as well as set a category for it. So this might be a sales tool since it is similar to Docs type of software. And if I wanted to know who was using these applications, I could just simply click on details and get a quick idea of who's using it, and then I can make my determination as to whether that is a productive use of time or not. One of the other important insights with ActualTech is going to be pieces related to screenshots and other alarms. So it's not necessary, but if you do want to enable screenshots to be able to get a little bit better understanding and a little bit better idea of where people are going and get that context for what is on their screen, know that we do have the ability to take screenshots. Now, these screenshots are derived from alarm conditions. So it's not an idea of let's take a screenshot of everything every 3 seconds. In fact, it's really more about let's look for specific things like somebody who's watching the inauguration or looking up Bluetooth headsets or those sorts of things, and let's maybe take a screenshot of it if that's necessary. For those of you that are worried about compliance related to screenshots, you can, of course, remove these altogether, or just know that we also do have the ability to redact sensitive information, and that's where you'll see some of these black bars listed over here in some of these various different screenshots where we're actually using AI to determine that it's a social security number, credit card number, email address, and so on, and we're redacting that information on your behalf. So that's a little bit about that piece of it. Again, really a wealth of information to bring in to understand all of the various different inputs that your people are using on a regular basis. Many of us in the manager position tend to look at the outputs of what people do and what they accomplish, the objectives that they have lined up in front of them for maybe the month or the quarter, and whether they were done. But the missing link for so many years has been this idea of not understanding how they get to that point. And so the biggest way that I look at and talk about ActualTech being useful for an organization is really about helping to modify behaviors, helping to coach employees and get them back on track where maybe they're spending too much time in one app or not enough time in another, or maybe if they're getting distracted, like so many of us can today with the digital world that we live in, helping to reduce those number of distractions. So that's just a little bit about us from the demo side. At this point, I'll go ahead and stop sharing that screen and jump back right over to the slides. I do want to talk a little bit about our customer journey, our productivity journey. For many people that are looking at a solution like ActualTech, this begins with the simple question of how do I measure productivity or efficiency, or even in its most simple form, how do I know what my employees are doing? And of course, this depends upon a number of different things. It depends upon the individual, depends on the team they're in, Depends on their role, whether they're remote, they're in the office, what their work looks like, if it's done synchronously or asynchronously, and also, of course, the outputs and the outcome of their work. Most people, when they first join into ActualTech and start on this journey of trying to get a better handle on productivity, they simply begin with just observing. And they just ask these very simple questions, you know, are my people working? When? How productive are they? Are they getting distracted with things like social media? And then after they've kind of got an understanding for observing and reporting, they'll move right on into iterating their existing processes. Again, modifying behavior. So which apps are we using? Let's have a meeting about it. Let's talk with our team, send them a quick note, and let them know, hey, we probably want to scale back on using that type of app and maybe increase the amount of time that we're spending in Salesforce or CRM applications. You know, this is a great way to also analyze meeting times. We can see all of the Zoom meetings, all the GoToMeetings that are taking place, phone calls, that sort of thing as well, how much time is spent collaborating. There may be a lot of time spent or not enough. And so honing in on that with a tool like ActualTech is a very valuable use of people's time. And this tends to happen, you know, about a month or two after you're into the productivity journey. And then as we really evolve and start to accelerate, we start to see a lot of efficiencies gained where the development and the coaching becomes a part of your DNA. It becomes a regular part of always understanding where your employees are, how often they're working, and again, what those outcomes look like, and helping to improve week over week, month over month, year over year, and to even consider things like who is at risk for burnout. That's something that I'm not sure every manager is really concerned with at this point, but it probably ought to be something that we look at really closely. As a lot of knowledge workers have moved to working from home, you know, the temptation to get online earlier, skip lunch, and work later into the evening tends to happen for a lot of people who are really driven or just simply can't put their work down. And so managers that can, you know, intervene and start to have those conversations with their employees, but they have to know about it first. And most employees won't bring it up on their own that are having a burnout issue. And so, again, with ActualTech, we really want to try to help maintain that work-life balance. Now, when introducing ActualTech to your organization, as I said, we do preach for transparency. We talk about, you know, why it's important. We talk about ways that we protect employee data and employee privacy. We're very clear with our people, too, about, you know, how we're collecting this data. Again, very secure data. By design, there's no key logging. There's no file system access. This is about insight. It's not about oversight. And that wouldn't be true if we weren't also sharing the productivity insights. So it's actually recommended that not only do you share this tool, ActualTech, with your managers, but also with those individual employees so they can see their own workloads, see their own habits. You know, it becomes pretty interesting as you look at your own information. Most people tend to either grossly overestimate the amount of time that they work in a given day or a given week, or on the other side of it, they grossly underestimate how long a project took to complete. And getting a better handle on that helps everybody. It helps the employee manage their time more effectively. It helps the employer manage that employee's time a little bit more effectively as well. So we definitely advocate for the sharing of information. We do have several different resources available for introducing ActualTech to your organization, including a messaging guide, a checklist. We've got PowerPoint presentations, email templates, and various different FAQs because, again, this is a new field for many people, a new vertical altogether with the idea of workforce productivity monitoring or workforce productivity analysis. And so there's going to be a lot of questions, and we understand that. We also have a productivity lab, which is a world-class center here at ActualTech. It's headed up by some productivity experts that will constantly release via blogs and support articles and other methods on ways to improve your own productivity. And finally, we do have an onboarding team that is there for you to help you understand and get the most out of the product that comes built in with every plan. Will help cover everything from setup and implementation to continuing education and even live support. We really are proud of our live support. It is very simple. I'll actually show you here briefly. And you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, back to the demo of this account, every single account has this button right over here, which provides access to our team. And as you can see, it says it's under 5 minutes, but the truth of the matter is we usually are able to respond to people in less than 30 seconds. So very, very fast response time, and going to be helpful whenever you need somebody to show you how to use our tool and maybe make the most sense of this. The last thing I'll share about ActualTech today is that we do have a few different editions. One of them is our freemium edition. So all accounts start off as an advanced account for a trial of 14 days, so you can really get in there and test it and see if it works well for you. The freemium account is free for life, up to 3 users and 3 gigs worth of data, and it comes with everything that you see here, whereas the advanced account goes on to unlimited number of users at $7.20 per user per month. And the very last thing I'll share today, guys, is, well, actually, let's turn it over for questions, David.
Absolutely, yeah. Really cool presentation. Love the live demo. Really powerful, really compelling, Mark. Also, I love the live support there. That was really cool. And finally, I also like you all just sharing your pricing right up front, as well as the premium model. So kudos there all around. We do have some great questions for you. While we take those questions, I'm just going to bring up this poll that says, what additional information would you like about the ActualTech solution? And I'll leave that up. I encourage everyone to respond to that while we answer your questions. So let's see, Mark, first question that came in, there's actually a couple here from Gary and Stefan around managers, for example, employees losing trust in their management, or managers abusing this. I mean, what are your recommendations around that?
Yeah, like anything, there's the potential for abuse in the system depending upon the nature and the character of those individuals. First, I would say that transparency is key, and that's why we advocate and preach it so much. If everyone is able to see, or have the expectation that what they are doing could in fact be monitored or known, then that alone is going to curb some behaviors that may otherwise occur. The truth is also, monitoring systems exist today inside of just about every aspect you can think of. If you think of endpoint protection, in the old days it was firewalls too, but of course we're all outside the typical corporate firewall perimeter. That information has always been available. We're just making it really easily available for the management team to see. But it's not just for the manager. It's also for the employee themselves to be able to understand how they work and be able to get an idea of how much time they spend, what their habits are, and that sort of thing. So I think that for the most part, this really evolves around reducing a couple of different things. We've got screenshots that are available. However, if that's a concern, we absolutely believe you should turn those off. The other thing is live screen views. Those are turned off by default as well. And in that kind of scenario, we'd advocate for you to keep that off as well. And it's really just about making sure that you're always open and communicating with your team both ways, both from the manager to the employee and from the employee to the manager.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I even had the thought of I'd like to enable this just for myself and view my own activity and kind of see my productivity over time using the freemium option. To me, that sounds interesting. Another question here came in. They're asking, actually, this is a multi-part question, but technically the question sums up to be, how does this work? Like, is there something installed on the employee's computer, and how does it track exactly what's happening?
You bet. Great question. So the way that it works is we do install a very lightweight agent on the employee's computer. That agent is so small, it takes up less memory and network consumption than a typical app like Spotify or Slack or Skype or any of those other S applications. But yeah, so it's a very lightweight, discrete agent that sits silently in the background. And all that it does is it simply looks for title bars, URLs, applications that are being used, and only the one that is actively being used, meaning the application or the window that currently has the focus from the keyboard and the mouse.
Got it. Okay. And then let's see, next question I wanted to ask you, they're saying, can I vary app or website productivity settings for one group versus another group?
You definitely can. A classic example of that is for your marketing or your PR teams. It might be a normal part of their job to be going to Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else like that. You can set that as productive time for them, but maybe for your R&D team or your sales team or others, those aren't productive activities. So you can definitely set productive or unproductive settings group by group.
Got it. That's cool. And then, I mean, what if people are using their same work computer to, say, surf the web, outside of work hours or do some shopping, in the evening? Is there some way to avoid capturing that kind of data?
Absolutely. We have a scheduling feature built into the product, so you can set it for whatever the employee's work hours are. You can easily move them in between those schedules too. So if they're going on vacation or things like that, they have time off, you can exclude that. But of course, you can by default exclude weekends and after hours times.
Excellent. That's cool. And then we've been talking about virtual desktops on here. Covering remote work. Is this compatible with terminal servers or virtualized desktops?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. Couldn't be easier. You just install the agent one time, and then anytime a user logs into the operating system of that terminal server or remote server, we'll automatically pick up that user and begin tracking their activities.
Cool. And then another question here, they're saying if someone is using their personal device, how do we track work-related activities while respecting privacy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if somebody's using a personal device, you need to make sure that you have their permission. So again, transparency is key, but you would have to have their permission to be able to install this agent on their personal device. This isn't something you could just go and clandestinely install. But if you did that, what I would recommend with doing it with the employee's permission is that you would create a secondary user profile for them. So a work user profile and a personal profile. And then you can simply exclude the personal profile from ever being monitored. So if they ever wanted to go get on social media or do shopping or do anything else and have that information remain private, they would just need to log into that account on their computer.
Very cool. So what should folks do to get started with ActualTech if they want to try it out?
Yeah, so just head on over to ActualTech.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a sign-up link. You can get started and get signed in within 30 seconds or so and download the agent. You'll be off and running in less than about 5 minutes. Of course, if you ever have any questions, hit that bottom right-hand corner button that says contact support or help. And we can always answer those questions for anybody. That's available both on the website as well as in the app.
Awesome. Well, really excellent presentation. Again, love the live demo and the active help support system there. That's really cool. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Mark.
You bet. It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and stay healthy.
For more information on ActualTech, to create a free account, click on the link there in the Handouts tab that says ActualTech. It'll take you directly to their website, and you can try it out for yourself. All right, and with that, it's time for our next Amazon $500 gift card announcement. If you haven't answered the poll question on the screen, I'll leave it up there to allow you a few more moments to do that. The next Amazon $500 gift card is going to Liang Sung from California. Liang Sung from California. Congratulations. So one more gift card to give out on the event today, so make sure you stay tuned. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter on today's EcoCast. Welcome, Mr. Rob Webb, Senior Security Solutions Engineer at Rapid7. Rob, thanks for being on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Take it away.
All right, will do. So today I'm here to talk to you all about, how Rapid7 can provide technologies that support and enable a remote workforce using Rapid7's next generation cloud analytics platform, the Rapid7 Insight platform. So when many first began working from home months ago now, it seems like forever, the security landscape became all but unrecognizable overnight. While the core security objectives have remained largely the same, everything else about how we meet these objectives changed. For example, vulnerability management changed. How do we suddenly, assess all these newly remote assets? Incident risk detection response changed. Like, how do we monitor systems that moved from inside the castle walls to everywhere else, right? When web applications expanded, how do we secure our web applications? So with all that increased workload, the challenge for security teams became, how do we adapt to this remote work environment where everyone is going to feel safe and secure? The only problem was, because of the looming economic impact of COVID-19 combined with the massively increased demand for our security teams, who were, let's face it, already overworked and understaffed, these teams were now being asked to do even more with much, much less. So what were we being asked to do, right? Let's think about it for a second. We were asked to provide visibility into all our remote workers. Where are they? What are they doing, right? How do we differentiate between our remote workers and people trying to pretend to be remote workers and infiltrate into our environments? How do we secure our new, software as a service and cloud solutions? How do we track the ephemeral assets that we're spinning up and down constantly to meet the demand for our resources, right? And now we're also being asked to deploy newer technologies to support these remote workforces with a new way of doing things. So, customers are now deploying containers for the first time, and they don't really have a way to assess those containers for risk. They're significantly expanding their cloud infrastructure. Maybe they were comfortable in AWS, but now they have to move into Azure and GCP and other infrastructures that they're not necessarily familiar with or how to secure. Massive increase in the use of golden images. Like I said, modern web applications. People were now moving their internal web applications to the outside so people can access them. But were they secure or as secure as they should be? So all these things combined for this conundrum of how do we get a handle on all of this? What tools are available to help us secure all these additional technologies? And when we talk about the less part, why do we have less? Well, let's face it, we have smaller budgets, right? Again, the economic impact, people were starting to tighten the waistband, and it took a while for people to reallocate to these security initiatives that were becoming obviously more important than they ever had been. Probably have the same headcount, maybe sometimes even a smaller headcount, but again, a lot more demand on their time to now suddenly do a lot more. The inability to have all these disparate technologies that they now have to log into to provide visibility and analytics across all these different security problems, and again, not really having the time to be able to log in to all their on-prem solutions, or not really have the time to do a lot of the mundane tasks that they used to have plenty of time for, right? So it became clear that we needed to give them, well-defined processes and automation and some kind of unified platform where they could log in to everything that they needed with one click, right? And get those different types of risk assessment and visibility into their environments without having to look at all these disparate technologies. So bring in the Rapid7 Insight platform. The Rapid7 Insight platform provides data collection, visibility, analytics, and automation to establish a shared point of view between your security and IT operations teams and your development teams. It's this cloud platform that's going to deliver that one-click access to Rapid7's vulnerability management solution, Insight VM, our detection response solution, Insight IDR, cloud security posture management, DivvyCloud, dynamic application security testing, or Insight AppSec, and then our orchestration and automation solution, which is Insight Connect. Not only that, but we also provide the Insight Agent, which is lightweight software that you can install on supported assets, either in the cloud or on-prem, to easily centralize and monitor the data that you're collecting for the Insight platform. It's the Insight Agent that gives us that endpoint visibility and detection by collecting live system information in near real time from your remote assets, including basic asset identification information, the running processes and logs, that allow us to do things like, vulnerability assessments and incident detection response from these, collecting this information from these assets and sending it into the Insight platform for that analysis and detection. So at Rapid7, for the past 5 years, I've been on the threat exposure management side of the house, which means I'm primarily involved with Insight VM, Insight AppSec, Metasploit, I'm sure some of you have heard of, and some managed services around those things, right? So Insight VM, if you're not familiar with it, Insight VM is built on Nexpose, which is our flagship vulnerability management solution. Over the past year, talking to customers and prospects about how Insight VM can help with this remote worker problem, the biggest thing that came up was, the cloud assets, right? Being asked to expand to the cloud, suddenly having the need to get a more visibility and assessment of these ephemeral assets, how to track them as they come up and go down, right? So for a couple of reasons. One is obviously licensing, right? With ephemeral assets that get spun up and spun down, you don't want to be charged extra for multiple assets that are short-lived, right? So the ability to use our dynamic discovery connections for Azure and AWS to allow us to track those assets and recognize when they've been spun up for the first time so we can assess them, but also recognize the difference between the asset merely being down or like offline or actually terminated so we can then remove that asset from the database and free up that license for another system. But then from a risk perspective, right? Being able to assess these assets, right, as they come up to know immediately what kind of risk, what kind of vulnerabilities live on those assets, what kind of compliance to CIS and other benchmarks are we meeting or not meeting, right? And then when those assets go away, remove them from the risk scoring because, let's face it, remediation is not only just about patching systems. Sometimes it's blowing systems away and getting them off your network if they're risky. So being able to automatically track these ephemeral assets and as they come up and go down was incredibly important for these teams. So that was like the biggest value add that we had. And then just remote workers and assessing those systems. How many people were already prepared to work at home? How many people already had laptops or were already set up at their home office? How many already had like the Insight agent or some other type of agent on the system that would allow these security teams to assess the vulnerabilities on those assets, right? So that became a huge push to suddenly not only get people ready to work from home, and sometimes that meant, boxing up an actual workstation and sending it home or reconfiguring their laptops and putting an agent on it because, let's face it, we're not going to deploy scan engines to everyone's living room, right? The idea that we could still perform our vulnerability assessments on hundreds of thousands of remote workers using the Insight agent was huge to these organizations. And then not only that, but as they expanded into new technologies like containers, right? Containerization was huge in terms of, making some of their expansion more efficient, but it brings its own risk, right? How do you assess containers, right? So Insight VM can connect to, common registries and repositories of container images, assess those images like in the Insight platform, and then when we scan your container hosts, we're able to identify and correlate like all your running containers with the images that gave birth to them. So any vulnerabilities and risk we found on the images, we can, extrapolate to those running instances and give you a good idea of where your riskiest containers are so that you can not really fix them because you don't really do that, but to replace them with more secure, hardened versions of the same. And it all, this is all thanks to the risk-based prioritization that's built into Insight VM, where we're looking at, multiple factors, not just CVSS scoring, which is industry standard. It's a great place to start, but it doesn't always tell you like the age of the vulnerability or the ease of exploitation or whether or not published exploits even exist, whether Metasploit modules exist. I mean, shameless plug, we own Metasploit. The Metasploit community is huge. You probably want to know if there's Metasploit modules for particular vulnerabilities in our environment because it could be the difference between a nation state with a lot of funding being the only ones that can exploit this particular vulnerability or some kid in his mom's basement, right? So the idea that you get that extra visibility and risk prioritization at that level and can provide all kinds of actual asset context in terms of, figuring out where you want to focus your remediation. And then having reporting that starts at the solution, right? Instead of giving your teams lists of all the thousands of vulnerabilities in your environment, but being able to look at the solutions that give you the biggest bang for the buck, that look at the greatest risk reduction with the least amount of time, effort, and energy. That all drove a lot of the progress for our security teams in terms of vulnerability management. Next up is Insight IDR. So we have Insight IDR is basically our agile and adaptable SIEM that's built in the cloud. So it can get you up and running quicker and faster than ever before, while continuously up-leveling your capabilities as you grow into the platform. So the way Insight IDR works is with over 800 pre-built rules and the ability to distinguish between just simple events, notable behaviors, and actual alerts, the alerts that matter, right? We're using machine learning and advanced analytics and those out-of-the-box detections that I talked about that are actually curated by our global SOC team and actually take advantage of Rapid7 research. It makes it so that you can quickly sift through the data to identify and respond to real threats all within the single interface, right? So, giving you visibility and response for that remote workforce, right? Traditionally, these people were inside your walls. It was kind of easy to monitor what they were doing, how they were authenticating, where those authentications were coming from. Now, with everyone dispersed into the wild, how do you differentiate between legit authentications from your remote workforce and bad actors trying to log into various systems, right? So the ability to look at user behavior analytics, figure out what the baseline is, what's normal for your workforce, and then look for deviations from that to identify unusual login activity or multiple country authentications, impossible travel scenarios like, hey, I was logged in from my Starbucks 5 miles from my house this morning, but then in 2 hours I was logging in from, Southeast Asia, right? The ability to kind of, alert on things like that. The ability to look at your cloud and software as a service, authentications, right? Being able to look and see where people are logging in from into your O365 and other cloud services you have, being able to leverage the APIs to monitor those authentications. Getting visibility into who your global admins are, who your riskiest users are, what credentials are set to never expire. All these things help us to secure that your environment and identify anything that would potentially indicate like a compromise in your environment using, again, user behavior analytics, like what are your people doing and what aren't they doing, as well as attacker behavior analytics, looking at our various research projects like Project Heisenberg, which is a global collection of honeypots that looks like at what attackers are doing in the wild, and then we can take that data and look at things in your environment and see if we can match them up and detect those indicators of compromise using attacker behavior analytics. And again, those are all those pre-configured rules, like over 800, I believe, at the time. So then next up brings us to DivvyCloud, right? So the other aspect of the expansion to the cloud was it's not enough just to look at those like compute instances from a vulnerability management perspective, but what about like storage and networking and IAM challenges, right? The ability to do a cloud configuration assessment and look at your cloud security posture management across multiple cloud platforms is huge for organizations that suddenly were thrusting people into cloud, cloud deployments that didn't have a lot of background on security, right? So what is DivvyCloud? It's a software platform primarily designed to help you solve for that continuous security and compliance gap in your cloud environments. What we're doing is we're looking at all the resources within those environments for any security configurations and misconfigurations, policy validation violations, aggregation of threat signal, and those IAM challenges that I mentioned. So essentially, we're going to help answer the questions around like, where is my data? Where is my data being processed? Who is accessing the data, and how are we accessing that data? So it starts with simply first harvesting, right? So it's an agentless harvest, right? We're using APIs for the cloud environments, AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba, and Kubernetes. So step one, query the APIs to get that data. And then step two is a unification of that data, bringing it all together in one place. This is like inventory building. We're then going to normalize that collected data. And by that, I mean we're converting your infrastructure data into a unified multi-cloud resource model. So instead of having to keep track of things like EC2 instances or ECR or RDS in AWS versus VMs or SQL in Azure or compute instances in Google, we're going to let you categorize all of your resources according to generic terminology: compute instances, containers, storage, networking, IAM, etc. The main advantage here is that you can set security policy once and have it apply across all of your cloud environments. You don't have to differentiate between Azure or AWS or Google or duplicate your rule sets across those cloud environments. So when we think about closing those gaps in our cloud environments, because let's face it, it's become very, very easy to deploy into these cloud environments. That's one of the reasons people are flocking to cloud environments, because it is easy to do, but by the same token, it's also easy to do wrong, right? So the ability to simultaneously identify these problems and then take action on it, right? After we're going to perform an analysis where we're going to look at that data, and we have these things called filters, which are essentially the assessment, right? We have over 1,000 filters that are very granular checks for things like whether something's not encrypted or whether it's open to the public, or whether certificates are required or not. The filters can be stitched together to create what we call insights, right? So you can take multiple filters, stitch them together for an insight, and run these insights across your cloud environment. We have over 500 out-of-the-box prepackaged collections of these filters, of these insights, which are based on some of the most common misconfigs and security gaps that cloud customers are making. Plus, whatever you want to make on your own by combining those prepackaged filters, so you can make your own insights. Each insight contains like a pass-fail status, an overview of the issue, a prescribed remediation, the recommended remediation bot, right? The workflow that's going to take action on that particular issue, and whether or not the insight applies to a compliance standard like CIS or some other HIPAA or other compliance standard that you may have. So basically, what happens? We collect all the data, we normalize the data, we run the rules on your data and look for violation of the rules, and then we take action. And that could be just stopping an instance and notifying someone. It could be terminating a resource after backing it up. The idea is that we're able to automatically take action very, very quickly so that we minimize your exposure to the internal threat that comes from those misconfigurations of your cloud environments. Next, I'd like to talk about Inside AppSec. I talked about how my customers have been forced to expand greatly their use of web applications due to the sudden remote workforce, right? And the problem is that they may not have had a fully fleshed out application security program. They may have been just doing SAST and not doing any DAST, or they may not even be doing any significant application security testing. That's still very common, believe it or not. So we are seeing an increased demand for a way for security teams to deploy and begin assessing their web applications quickly, but still having the ability to give meaningful information to the development team so that they could actually take action on the findings, right, in a way that makes sense to the developers. So enter Inside AppSec, which is our dynamic application security testing tool. And as I'm sure you all know, today's attackers are sharing that common channel of attack, which is now the millions of custom web, mobile, and cloud applications that our customers are deploying. And it doesn't matter if they have one app or dozens of apps. The attackers love attacking apps because the victim pool can be so big. It could be a web app where it's internal and they're going after your stuff, or they could be using your app to target your customers. Web apps are always going to continue to be a lucrative target for attackers. So how good was Inside AppSec for this challenge? Well, first of all, we've consistently earned Gartner's highest rating for a web application scanning tool, thanks to DAST features like our Universal Translator, which allow us to test modern frameworks like Java, SOAP and REST APIs, single-page applications, and then thanks to multiple authentication options, we can help you be sure that you're actually getting full coverage of your applications, right? So we saw a significant increase in POCs of Inside AppSec. People were leveraging against their internal applications that were now publicly available to their remote workforce. They were using it to take a second look at their their customer-facing applications. There is a lot of demand and just to shore that up. Sometimes it was a check-the-box exercise, and sometimes it was really like a legitimate expansion of their DevSecOps teams and really trying to improve that relationship with the security and the DevOps teams. And because of how we are, again, it's a tool that's easy for security teams to deploy, configure the scans, and run the scans. But the findings, right, are tailored to that developer audience, so they can look at the findings, recognize what part of the app needs to be addressed, and then they can go ahead with one click. They can validate a fix, right? They don't have to rerun the entire scan in order to see if what they fixed actually worked. They can look at individual findings, rerun just the attacks that reveal those findings, and validate whether or not their fix worked or whether or not they have to go back to the drawing board. Last piece that we saw a lot of interest in was Insight Connect, which is our security orchestration and automation solution. The idea here is that, again, when you're asked to do a lot more with less, you have a lot less time for those mundane tasks, right? So we needed to have creative ways to free up our teams in order to focus on those things that do require, legit hands-on effort, right? So it was things like integrate our existing tool sets, right? They may have a bunch of tools that don't have a native integration, so we're able to use Insight Connect to create integrations between those tools. It may have been building automation workflows. If you go to our Rapid7 extensions website, you'll see that we have an extension library that covers Insight VM automation and ransomware containment and incident detection response workflows. Like, for example, one of my favorites is the impossible travel, right? Where basically you can get an alert when someone seems to be logging in from a location that they shouldn't be in the first place, right? And then from there, you can it determines the country, the location, if it's malicious, and then it can engage with that end user via Slack or Microsoft Teams and ask if they want to implement like an ingress or an egress block in their Palo Alto firewall. So these are automation. That's the type of automation that address the real threats that a remote workforce brings is that uncertainty about whether or not these are legit authentications or whether or not they're bad actors taking advantage of the newly expanded remote workforce. From an Insight VM perspective, how great would it be to go ahead and kick off like a remediation validation scan from within Slack? Like, hey, I just ran all these patches. Now I want to make sure that they actually fix the vulnerabilities. Do I have to log back into Insight VM and kick off a full scan? No, I can just rerun the scan that relates to the solutions that I just applied. So it's only going to run the vulnerability checks related to those solutions on the assets that were in scope for that remediation. So again, finding ways to minimize the time, effort, and energy it takes to accomplish the tasks that normally require a little bit more time, effort, and energy, right? We can also have what we call automation-assisted patching, right, where we still want to utilize human decisions to automate tasks, but let the automation task do a lot of the heavy lifting. Let it build out those patch packages in SCCM or BigFix, and let a human being look at that work and say, okay, yeah, I want to push that. Or is it just about improving operational efficiency, right, or in communication? So there's a lot of increased interest in the security orchestration automation over the past several months as well. So thank you very much. At this point, I will turn it over to any questions you may have.
Yeah, it's a great presentation. Sorry about the echo problem there, but really cool what you guys are doing there at Rapid7. We do have some questions for you from the audience. And while we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Rapid7 solution? And I'll leave that up while we take some Q&A. So let's see, Rob, first question I see here that came in, they're asking, how is it possible that Rapid7 is able to manage, for example, cloud workloads that are running on AWS and GCP?
So that's a great question, and I did cover that a bit. So from Insight VM perspective, right, we're able to use those the dynamic discovery connection, the asset sync connection to identify those assets being spun up and spun down, so we can do a better job of assessing risk related to those assets. Within GCP, we can generally treat GCP just like the traditional environment. Like you can deploy scan engines in GCP to scan your infrastructure in GCP. You can deploy the Rapid7 Insight agent on those systems, Windows, Linux, and Mac systems, in order to provide that assessment. For looking at things other than compute instances, like those EC2 instances in AWS or the compute instances in GCP, if we want to look at, again, the other cloud resources like storage and networking and IAM, that would be a better play for DivvyCloud, right? Which, like I mentioned, we're doing that using the API to harvest the data about those resources, and then run those filters and insights against those resources to look for those gaps in compliance, and also run them against common compliance standards. And then if there are problems, you can either notify people that there's a problem, or you can take immediate action to fix the problem right then and there. It could be something as simple as, hey, we identified a bunch of servers that don't have the Insight agent. Let's go ahead and deploy that. Or it could be literally just backing up and killing systems or killing services that are allowing, like, for example, an S3 bucket open to the wild. You want to lock that down immediately.
Very nice. Very nice. That's cool. And so there's a question from Mike here about, does this have any sort of impact on network bandwidth to actually perform the monitoring?
There's always going to be some network bandwidth, but, like, for example, the Insight agent is such a low bandwidth consuming agent. In terms from a vulnerability management perspective, when you first deploy the agent, it's going to upload a fingerprint of the asset. And then every 6 hours thereafter, it's only going to upload a delta, what's changed. From an incident detection response perspective, generally those agents are put into action when there's an issue, and where we directly pull the agent to give us some of that local asset information. So, in 5 years now I've been with Rapid7, I haven't heard too many complaints in terms of bandwidth utilization being a problem from either a vulnerability management perspective, whether it's scanning or the agents checking in, or from the incident detection response perspective. With application security, right, we're just basically, it's browsing the application. Every link in the application, it's sending attacks in the form of requests, right, and getting responses. So you can totally tune that for your environment. Chances are you have application load balancers. They're doing some of that throttling already. So again, haven't really heard too many complaints or any complaints really about bandwidth consumption from an application security point of view. And then with respect to DivvyCloud, it leverages the APIs for those environments, and with AWS we can use event-driven harvesting. So if there is concerns about API calls or bandwidth utilization, you can have it only trigger that collection of resource data when something's changed. And that's okay.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Let's see, another question that came in, they were asking about actually deploying the tools. Deploying the agent. What recommendations do y'all have about that?
So there's multiple ways to skin that cat, right? The agents themselves are, from an Insight VM perspective, for example, you can go to your dashboard, go to the agent, go to an agent card, and download a pre-configured agent, an MSI that already has the configuration files and the JSON file that basically tells that agent who it belongs to and how to communicate its data to the Insight platform, so that that asset and vulnerability data goes to your particular organization, right? But you can also do mass deployments through things like GPOs and SCCM. Let me think about this. So yeah, we can do SCCM. We can do a token-based mass deployment. We can do Microsoft Group Policy. You can push out the agent, or you can use a Windows batch file. So when someone logs in, for remote workers, generally, creative solutions I've had where people are taking the agent package, applying agent attributes to it. So as part of the installation, it's going to basically automatically tag that asset for a particular geographic location or a workflow, and then make it available to an end user to download and install it themselves. Or like I mentioned previously, they're pushing out through existing tools that they have, like SCCM or through Group Policy.
Very cool. Very cool. And then another question that came in, they're asking about what's unique about Rapid7's reporting?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of things, right? So from an Insight VM perspective, I think I touched on it earlier. The thing that got me to leave my previous job and join Rapid7 was the solution-centric top remediation report that instead of giving me a list of, thousands of vulnerabilities and asking me to, look up the vulnerabilities, correlate them based on common solutions, vulnerability roll-up solutions, whatever, or, create pivot tables to figure out what I'd have to do, and then, try to use my own knowledge of CVSS or other metrics to figure out what I need to do first. Instead, that report gives you a list of 25 solutions that are going to have the greatest impact in terms of risk reductions. When we look at how Rapid7 scores each vulnerability, we use our Rapid7 risk score, which takes into all those real-world, factors I talked about earlier. Each vulnerability gets a risk score. Every asset can have a criticality rating, which will weight that risk score of those vulnerabilities either up or down, depending on the importance of the asset. And that data is fed into that report. And when they add it all up, it basically will say, okay, these 25 solutions are ranked from highest risk reduction to lowest, and are going to, are designed to tell you what do I have to do and where do I have to do it. So your infrastructure team doesn't need a knowledge of security, because when you look at, PHP, for example, I think I saw one report where there were like 35 assets that needed a PHP upgrade, but it represented something like 7,500 different vulnerabilities. Do you really want to look at a spreadsheet of 7,500 vulns, or do you just want to know, oh, hey, upgrade PHP on these 35 systems, right? So that's one of the things that makes, security teams, puts them in better light with the infrastructure teams and their help desk teams, because we're not asking them to put on the security hat or do anything other than just what they're already good at. In terms of, and not only that, but we also have really good visualization in the Insight VM dashboards that allow you to go beyond static reports and look at near real-time data. So you can look at things like what's being actively targeted, what are my FireEye vulnerable assets in my environment. Just plug in the query of those 16 CVEs that they published, make a query, apply that to your environment, and see what assets come back as having any of those 16 vulns. Okay, boom. Create a remediation project, push that project out to ServiceNow or Jira, and boom, now you have a remediation workflow that can address that in near real time without having to wait for someone to generate a report, and distribute that report, and then sit there with a Sharpie and a highlighter marker and a cup of coffee and scratch things off the report. From Inside AppSec perspective, I think that the thing that the highest marks we get for that report is the fact that it's tailored for the developer audience, right? The tool is easy for non-developers to run and run the scans and configure the scans, but the reports are designed so that the developers can look at the report and identify where the problem is, what the best practice is for remediating that. Because let's face it, unlike network vulnerability scanning, where when you have a vulnerability, it's a very cut and dry, upgrade this software, run this patch. With application security, the fix depends on what the application is and what it's doing. And some fixes you can't do because they're going to break the application. So you have to give the developers guidance and references like common weakness enumeration and OWASP, right? And let them look at what those best practices are and then apply those best practices to their application. Because it's not a cut and dried solution, you have to give them the ability within the report to validate that what they did actually worked. So I mentioned earlier that one-click vulnerability validation that can be done through a Chrome plugin. You click on the button in the report, it pops open a Chrome plugin with the original request that found the actual the vulnerability or the weakness in the app, and resends that exact request. Or you could modify the request and send it to a different target. Let's say you found it in your production environment, but you want to fix it in your developer or your staging or your QA environment first. Well, you can just change the target and send it to where you actually fix the problem and validate it that way, assuming that they're running in parallel. So I think those probably stand out to me as the two biggest differentiators of our reporting from, again, based on customer feedback.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds like some really powerful reporting there. Well, Rob, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here on our live Q&A session, but I've routed some more technical questions to you there in your queue on the platform. So really great presentation again. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you very much for having me.
For more information on Rapid7, of course, visit rapid7.com. You can sign up for the Rapid7 Insight trial. And there's also a Rapid7 Insight demo over on the website. It's a 30-day free trial, so we encourage you to check it out for yourself. And, as I say, seeing is believing. So thank you, of course, for everyone sticking with us all the way here to the end of today's EcoCast. I've learned a lot. I hope that you have as well. It's now time for our final prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Charlie Pridgeon from North Carolina. Congratulations, Charlie Pridgeon from North Carolina. Also, congratulations to all the other prize winners. I will post all the names in the chat. Doing that right now. And before you go, I want to remind you to check out the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. All the ActualTech Media social links. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, we encourage you to reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, we hope that you'll join us for another upcoming EcoCast happening next week, supercharging education and government IT cloud environments. You'll hear from Duo and Rubrik experts on that event. After today's webinar, you'll be automatically redirected to the ActualTech Media events homepage, where you can view and register for all of our upcoming events. We hope to see you there. I hope that you have a great day. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.